Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coeo's webinar on cloud communication challenges for the healthcare industry. I'm Eric Wentz, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Coeo Solutions, a cloud-based communication as a service provider specializing in security, SD-WAN, SIP trunking, and unified communication solutions. Our reason for co-hosting this webinar, along with Ribbon Communications and Advocate Aurora Health, is to talk about the evolving world of networking and communications for the healthcare industry. There are significant challenges in the healthcare industry that telecom can deeply impact to help solve problems created by regulatory changes, ongoing compliance needs, security, and performance requirements. I believe there are many more technology issues to cover that affect the healthcare than we have time to cover today, so we're going to try to focus the agenda on 4 key areas. The first one is healthcare communication trends, the importance of highly available voice data and security networks, technology challenges created by ongoing M&A in the healthcare industry, and how organizations have been able to evolve from legacy systems safely and cost effectively. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our 3 featured speakers. Our first speaker will be Greg Zweig, the VP of Marketing at Ribbon Communications, and he'll speak on healthcare communication trends. Our next speaker will be Kevin Orofino, VP of Engineering and Operations at Coeo Solutions, and he'll speak on healthcare communication requirements and the need for high availability voice data and security. Our last speaker is Joe Tenuta, Vice President of Health Informatics and Engineering at Advocate Aurora Health. We're excited to have Joe speak with us as he's gone through a tremendous network upgrade from legacy single-threaded TDM infrastructure to a highly available, highly secure SIP trunking infrastructure that's producing wonderful results at hundreds of his locations. At the end of Joe's presentations, we'll conduct a quick open discussion. If at any time during this presentation you have a question, please add in the chat session, and Brian Gregory from Ribbon will facilitate the Q&A at the end. I hope you find this webinar educational, insightful, and I thank all of you for joining. And so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg from Ribbon to talk about our first topic of healthcare communication trends. Greg, it's all yours.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it very much, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So, Brian, if I could get you to head to the next slide. I think we're lucky here at Ribbon. We're very fortunate to have some of the largest healthcare organizations in the country who are our customers, and in some of the biggest cities. And I've had a chance over a number of years to visit with a large number of them, and particularly in the last few years, we've seen kind of an interesting change in how providers see their communications environment. And I tried to sort of define it here on this slide. I think, and I'd be curious to hear as we get into the open session later whether you all agree, but what we see is a big change where we have a number of providers have very traditional phone requirements. They need to have the disposable room phones in the hospital. They're still using things like fax. A lot of the calling is interdepartment. You're not calling to an individual, you're calling to the person who's working on the 3rd floor in the X-ray department, things of that nature. And those people are still using traditional hard phone devices. And of course, they're working in an office in the environment. But at the same time, particularly since the pandemic, we've seen a huge growth in cloud collaboration tools, right? And obviously these are for telemedicine, but I think more typically you see the kind of, I'll call it classic business collaboration environment where you have an administrator who wants to, talk about budgets with their coworkers, and they want to share a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation. And a lot of those people are now in a position where they've learned to work hybrid. They're at home maybe 1 or 2 days a week. Maybe they're mobile part of the time. and they're operating off of clients like I am here today, or mobile devices. So we have this kind of odd scenario where you have, all this traditional telecom, but it's now being mixed with sort of the more modern cloud-based collaboration. And Brian, if I could get you to move to the next slide, I think part of the challenge there in this diagram, and I know it's a busy diagram, is that as that change has happened, we've seen a change in threat parameters. So if you look on the left, you see kind of what I think most healthcare environments look like 5 years ago, which is, hey, I had a PBX, maybe I had a contact center. It's all in one building or in a group of buildings. And basically, I worried about what was happening outside of me, and I tried to secure it, right? Which is I created a perimeter around myself, and I knew that the people who operated inside of my environment were safe, and the people who were outside of it I had to worry about. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, I think today what we see more and more is this kind of mix where we still have some people operating in that internal environment, but they're a subset, right? Actually, what's happening is a lot of more of my users are remote, particularly contact center agents, but all the folks we talked about in the last slide. And then I have a mix of software. Some of it's my PBX might be running in that blue circle on the right, but my contact center software or my cloud collaboration software might be up in the cloud. So as a result of that, we see a lot more places where potentially people are trying to threaten the organization. We hear ransomware, trying to get personal records, all the things that healthcare providers worry about. There's more places that you have to think about securing the solution. And so if you move to the next slide, Brian. So at Ribbon, what we've seen is really the summary is there's a tremendous need to integrate all these disparate elements and secure them, right? So what we see happening, and I think what Joe and Kevin will talk about, is this need to be able to bring together the legacy pieces and the new pieces and create a contiguous environment. It needs to be cloud and premise. It needs to be vendor agnostic. It needs to be transparent to employees and to patients. Probably most of the folks on the phone, certainly us, we're all technologists, but for the everyday employee in a healthcare environment, they don't want to know how the phone system is put together. They want to dial an extension and get the person. They don't care what system they're connected to, right? So all of those things have to happen, and then it needs to be incredibly reliable because you're in a healthcare environment, and it needs to be incredibly secure. And that's what we focus on today at Ribbon, and I think as you hear, you'll hear that's what the Coeo team focuses on and what's important to Joe. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and solutions that he's seen in the space from a Coeo perspective.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Welcome, guys. I'm Kevin Orfino, Vice President of Engineering at Coeo Solutions. And as Greg alluded, I'm going to talk about a few of the high-level challenges that are facing healthcare organizations across the U.S. and really the world. With the pandemic, right? I don't think anyone has not been scrambling around trying to find a work from home, work from anywhere type solution, or increasing their presence in cloud applications such as contact centers or Microsoft Teams for Zoom or Zoom calls and things like that. And what happens with those, right? Especially from a healthcare perspective, we saw this at Advocate, right? We needed to act quickly. We didn't have time to waste. There were temporary locations being set up for patients to get tested for COVID, and those things required really significant time to put behind what that solution should look like. And some got it right and some didn't. So those are challenges that I think we got it right with Advocate for sure. But those are challenges that folks weren't lucky enough to have that. And so they have things that were maybe half-baked or not fully vetted that they're still trying to bring those things into the mix. With that, right, we talk about uptime. From a healthcare perspective, making phone calls and having a a call fail is just not an option, right? We need to be able to talk. Patients need to be able to call into the service providers in conversely between the healthcare organization itself. They need to be able to reliably talk and have applications and have images sent and things like this. So uptime is a huge challenge that we're always facing. And as we add these different islands, if you will, think about all the people working from home are just simply new islands that are out there that now those IT organizations have to address, right? And make sure things are secure. So we increase our attack surface. So, Greg was talking about these bad actors and these ransomware attacks. It's just exposing more out there for folks that want to cause havoc. And, we need stronger protections, right? So these are things that are definitely on the agendas that we see people asking us on a daily basis, right? And then, as you also alluded to, the legacy systems and the integration. I'll talk more about that in the M&A space. But then the biggest one for everyone is cost, right? So, I was playing golf with a finance guy from a large medical supplier here in Columbus, Ohio. And he said, yeah, I can't believe it. Pre-pandemic, a shipping container cost $2,000. Today, it's $25,000. And, I thought I heard him wrong. I didn't. I got it verified by 2 other people. And it's just incredible. So they can't take that cost and pass it along to the downstream consumer, which is you and I, which is great. However, the businesses are being hit with that. And Joe can allude to these in his talk as well. But that's something that, we start looking at other areas, and telecom expenses is typically a large piece of any business that's operating successfully. So that's always a target place. So you can go to the next slide, Brian. So what I broke down here is really 3 areas of tackling most of these challenges, right? And as Eric said, there's plenty of other opportunities and challenges that are out there in different solutions, but these are the 3 main high-level areas for solutions, right? So we talk about redundancies. Organizations are bringing in different providers for your bandwidth and your data connections. And so you have 3 different providers, say, and now you have 3 different support organizations and 3 different contacts that you have to work on, 3 different bills. And so there's plenty of overhead that's being wasted there. So what folks are looking for is aggregate carriers that can actually bring in that same underlying carrier, but as an aggregate. And so you source down to a single point of contact for all of your support and billing. It saves you money in the long run and saves you headaches, right? So these are things that we see and we do on a daily basis. And then in terms of our SD-WAN offering, we have an SD-WAN offering using Versa technologies, and this helps us attack some of those challenges with visibility into your network, right? Providing you some orchestration, some monitoring, analytics that you just didn't have before at a layer 7 perspective, so that you can find out if people are chewing up your bandwidth doing YouTube videos and downloading those types of things. And you can steer that correctly down the right path and leave bandwidth for your critical applications, such as voice, right? Another thing it does, it provides you site-to-site encryption, so that's security for HIPAA and all the other certifications that we need to abide to are just inherently part of that solution. Another key benefit from an SD-WAN solution is you take these aggregate circuits that are coming into an enterprise, and the most likelihood of the failure is at that circuit level. So in most businesses, they can take a hit and the calls can drop and they can re-originate and the call will complete to over another circuit. And that's fine for a lot of businesses, but for healthcare, it just can't happen, right? We've got to keep that call up. And so whether you're doing BGP or some higher level routing protocols to help with that, or you can use an SD-WAN solution to help you combat that, so your voice can stay up. So if calls are coming over circuit A and that takes a fiber hit, the call will stay up and we'll send the packets with an SD-WAN overlay over circuit 2 or circuit 3, and nobody loses voice path, which is what it needs to be. And then as we start to talk down at the third level is the session border controller space, right? And this is where Ribbon comes into play. They provide, carrier class SBCs and routing technology that every carrier in the world is using. And we're no different. And we've taken that and we've pushed it down into the healthcare industry. And this is what allows Joe and his team at Advocate to be successful, put everything into their control that can be in their control. We're doing secure voice. We're doing an HA architecture. If calls are up on one SBC and there's a hardware failure, all the calls transfer over to the backup SBC, and there's 0 calls dropped. Up to 100,000 calls have been tested, and they fail over seamlessly, which is just incredible. And then you have your centralized routing policies and the ability to bring in and connect disparate PBXs and systems is just I can't describe how awesome it is when you can bring in that type of a solution for a company like Advocate Aurora Health that has a couple of different locations and different things that they want to connect to, such as different contact centers and UCaaS solutions that are dispersed through different departments. It's just beautiful to be able to seamlessly walk in and provide a solution for that type of an environment. Next slide here, Brian. And then really, I look at the M&A landscape as really just all those challenges that you're facing is really just escalated, tenfold, right? It's those challenges on steroids. So, you just imagine if companies are coming together that have the same, or they have different technology. So you may have an Avaya PBX, an Alcatel PBX, a Lucent PBX, a call manager. Some of them are all legacy, some of them are SIP enabled. And the biggest challenge is how do we bring these together underneath one umbrella and really utilize the benefits that SIP and the new technology provides to us, right? And so, along with Ribbon's core SBCs, there are edge SBCs that are there that help with that legacy analog PRI handoffs, and it allows you to stage, at the end of the day, your strategic migration of bringing these companies together very seamlessly and very much at your own pace, right? And that's been one of the biggest things that I think we've seen, even at Advocate and other healthcare provider healthcare enterprises throughout the country, right? So I think that is the biggest, challenge that the companies have. And I think we were talking about this the other day. What really makes this all work is really the partnerships, right? And so we look at obviously Advocate's a customer of Coeo, but they're also a partner, and we're their partner, and we have a great partnership with Ribbon. And I think that is, really what gets us through these types of solutions that are needed for today's, healthcare industry to stay up and fully operational 100% of the time. So, with all that said about partnerships, I can't imagine a better partner to showcase and to be proud of what we've done there, and excited to hear Joe talk about all the things that we did with them. And without further ado, I just want to introduce from Advocate Aurora Health, Joe Tenuta.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thank you to Ribbon and Coeo for the invite. Kind of caught me off guard, but ready to prepare. They gave me some time to make sure that what we had was going to resonate with those that were going to be participating today. So I appreciate the opportunity. I wear 3 different hats for the system. I do the video technology, also the network engineering, but as it pertains to today's content, we'll be talking about the network voice infrastructure and what we've taken. It's been quite the journey. I think a lot of people initially thought I was a little crazy, like, why would you do this? The phones work fine. It's 100-year-old technology. And then I got some stern warnings from really technical people, which was, man, if this doesn't work, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So it was tough those first couple of months that we tried to convince people that this was the journey we wanted to make internally. But once we got that buy-in, we went through a vetting process, both from an equipment perspective, but also from a carrier perspective. So hopefully I can cover all that today and raise and spark some curiosity. So I'm really happy to be here to mingle with all of you. So put together some quick slides. Certainly not a PowerPoint by death, but I'm going to cover these high level and really get into the nuts and bolts here shortly. But some of the business drivers that we looked at was we really wanted to leverage new technologies for a number of different reasons. We made a very sizable investment before I even got to Advocate, and then through the 11 years that I've been there, in our VoIP infrastructure. And it just seemed a little, kludgy that we just kind of ignored the carrier space and really didn't focus in on that at all. So there was curiosity there. What SIP look like? Can we do this fun stuff that everybody keeps talking about? Certainly security is always top of mind now more than ever, but back then, TLS encryption, secure RTP, absolutely things that were being pushed upon me by our security director and our CISO at the time, who also happened to be my boss, to say, what can we do, if we went to this model? When we looked at the hardware, one of the things that really came to light when we started planning architecture was, embedded firewalls. And if it met the criteria of someone who's real pain in the butt for me, which is my peer and the director of security side, and he said, look, I really like what at the time it was Sonus, what the Ribbon product has. And I'll have a funny story to share with that his engineers did not pass their first round of security training to be a certified engineer on the product, which made me laugh a little bit. So I said, tell that to your Palo Alto folks, that it's a pretty darn good product. But I still razz them to this day. And then we wanted to look at ways in which we could start to look at SD-WAN offerings. How do we leverage that same infrastructure to route voice traffic over, right? And then the thing that maybe wasn't an initial driver, but is absolutely a driver now, is TDM trunking conversion. So I don't mean the traditional PRIs, but I'm talking about POTS lines. I'm talking about alarm lines. I'm talking about fax lines that I don't know if you guys are getting the warnings I'm getting, but they're insisting that the tariffs are going to take place. They're going to start hitting us hard. And I said, okay, so how do you want me to remediate it? And they offered me about 4 pieces of equipment at the tail end of a SIP trunk to do media conversion. I said, well, that's cool, but we can do it with a single card that we're going to add to our session border controller and just have a much cleaner, cut process. So along with that came some additional cost savings that weren't in our initial estimates. So that's been fun. It's a pain in the butt, but it's a great journey to be on because you're now fully leveraging that initial investment that you made. From a flexibility perspective, we're call control freaks. We're getting requests all day long for number portability, right, type concerns. Sorry, I know it's a 20,000 DID, call range, but I need this number. It's an important number, and it's not going to point somewhere else, which is typically a contact center solution. So you're breaking up what was a homogeneous dial plan. And in the old days, in a PRI world, where you might port from carrier A to carrier B, that's a problem. That takes time. It's often not nimble enough or quick enough for us to meet the demands of the business. By being able to stabilize that on SIP and then literally placing a ticket with our chosen vendor here in Coeo and saying, yeah, we're not going to bring that in internally to our own network, but that's actually going to point to our cloud contact center solution. And we'll get into that peering relationship there. And then the flexibility of being able to, on a fly, change our business continuity and disaster recovery models. They're pretty static, but from time to time, we do have to make changes, especially in this day and age where most buildings that we occupy that are not medical centers, they're shadows and ghosts of what they used to be. So we are changing modeling pretty much on the fly. And again, with the hardware that's in place today and the technology that's available to us, we're not waiting on a carrier. We're not. So that's been absolutely crucial to our success. Next slide, please, Brian. So some of the selfish things that we wanted, as if the prior slides weren't selfish enough, was the self-supportability and to be able to scale whenever we needed to. And I think Kevin will attest to this, but we don't have a whole lot of carrier involvement today. The model, when I took over the telecommunications piece 11 years ago, we were completely reliant on what can and can't be done based on archaic rules, archaic processes, and something that I like to call as the black hole. Put the request in and you wait. I couldn't give any ETAs. We couldn't provide any kind of strong customer support. And that weighted heavily on us, right? I have a very caring team of engineers that we don't want to be sitting on waiting on requests for 30 days or longer. And then we wanted the ability, in addition to that, to quickly add capacity or maneuver capacity as need be, right? That's this whole centralized SIP diagram that we'll show you here shortly. Hopefully we'll be able to show you how well we can scale and move things around. So by adding capacity and being able to pretty much dial up the wick whenever we needed to with a pretty quick operational change on our end and or some involvement from Coeo. So we're not completely independent of them. But that was key, right? To be able to deliver the demands of healthcare pretty much immediately. The economics. While I didn't originally know if the ROI, was going to really vet out, what we found was that, and we purchased the equipment, right? So we didn't lease, we didn't do a holistic cloud approach. We have very robust data centers in which we wanted to leverage. The way that they're powered, the way that they're managed and engineered, we light our own direct fiber into them. We felt it was robust enough that we can build this internally and manage it like our own little carrier network. So that ROI actually wound up paying itself true in roughly 16 months. So I double checked my numbers last night. Originally, we had proposed a 36-month ROI on the original investment of the data center, session border controllers, and then those that were local there to our hospital campuses. The telecommunication savings, again, we'll talk about this in a later slide, but much to my chagrin, 25% and a minimum savings on that initial turnout. And that project really was scoped around the hospitals. We didn't touch our clinics. We didn't touch our tier 2 sites. That number is specifically for the hospitals. As we started to look at TDM replacement, narrowband circuits, right, POTS lines, things of that nature, and then hitting our SD-WAN environment into our clinics, that number is probably overall closer to 40%. So we had a voice spend in the state of Illinois alone, mostly with one carrier, in excess of double-digit figures, 10+ million. Huge amount of trunks, huge amount of traffic. We overbuilt, right? I'm sure some of you that are in healthcare today, when census is high and you're going to get into that 4th or 5th PRI, most of the time it's dormant, right? We could see that in traffic studies. So we took that into account when we rebuilt the voice network. It allowed us a chance to clean up our inventories. Again, not the most fun process, and those people deserve many meals and many drinks on the house because of the efforts that they had to do to scrub CSRs and make sure that we're moving numbers that needed to be moved as opposed to numbers that were there and nobody really knew what they were pointed towards. So a lot of cleanup. Again, you're going to get a substantial reduction in unused services as well. And then the chance to finally get least cost routing capabilities. Recently, we implemented a management layer over our session border controllers, and I'm sure it's more than a management layer. I don't have my propeller hat on, so forgive me, but our PSX EMS environment, which we turned up in 22, we started it last year, it's been turned up this year, provides us the chance to provide least cost routing more than what just the PBX has allowed us to do, right? So in the state of Wisconsin, I've got everything. I've got Avaya Red, I've got Nortel Blue, we've got Cisco, we've got Alcatel, we've Vodavi. I can name some wingdingers from the 1990s that some of you would just cringe at knowing that we have the inventory there. Regardless, my point in that is that I can't do any least cost routing there unless we had some type of system that said, hey, look, that's in our dial plan, that should not go out. right, through the public service telephone network. So that's our goal. We've been doing it now, I think, Greg, it's been 3 months, 4 months, but you know, obviously the more mature environment is able to leverage the SIP infrastructure, and we're working towards that. So that's been fun. I don't even have a number as to what that could potentially save us from providing that layer of internal call control. Brian, next slide. So how we did it, and this is just a chalkboard sketch. We didn't want to get too in the details. We certainly can if anybody wants to take a deeper dive later on or through the Q&A. So what we asked of the many organizations, carriers, is how would you deliver this? Talk to me around geographic redundancy. Talk to me around carrier redundancy. I didn't want a single-threaded, you know, fiber to touch another fiber if it was part of an HA environment. And we did that. So we leveraged the Chicago Oak Brook location as a, you know, primary, secondary, depending on what month it is, right, when we rotate. And then we used their data center colo in Denver to be the secondary source. That comes into one of 3 data centers. Initially, it was 2, and that funded all of the efforts for Illinois. And then as we now start to build the same model in Wisconsin, we now have one in our northern Wisconsin data center to funnel SIP services to the hospital campuses and more. But traditionally, we go after the hospital campuses first. So we have the data underlay has redundancy. So we're not using, you know, any particular data vendor more than for one leg of that delivery model. In each of these data centers, we went with a 5410 series box, and they are configured in an HA environment. So if A fails, B takes over, vice versa. If there is, again, the data underlay, we have that redundancy built in where from A it'll go to B. In the worst case scenario where for whatever reason the data center becomes an island and I don't have connectivity to it, we can actually reroute on any one of the other 2 data centers in the same fashion. So we'll still have HA pairs in each of those with carrier redundancy. I think we're slowly getting there in Wisconsin, but the hardware is there, the licensing there's, the concurrent SIP call paths are there. So what we did when we built that centralized SIP model, so it delivers into these data centers. From there, it leverages either a dark fiber network or multiple WAN connectivities back out to our major campuses. And what that allowed us to do was to say, look, all this overage, all this waste that we built into the PRI infrastructure out at the individual sites, we didn't build it for that. We built it for, I thought was a worst case scenario. We haven't even maxed out from some of our initial trunk projections. So we built those concurrent paths to be able to route down any one of those sequences back to the sites. In the event that you know, we need overages and whatnot, we were able to play around with round robin. We did percentage-wise distribution over the network if we need to avoid capacity issues. And Kevin was instrumental. I think he had to drop off the call, but he was instrumental at being able to help us determine, you know, what made the best sense from and it's not really a DRBC, probably more of a business continuity perspective. But if we were to ever hit a high census of phone calls for whatever reason through this infrastructure, we've yet to see it. Knock on wood, you know, we've yet to see any failure in the 6 years that it's been up and running. And that's not to say we haven't had a failure. The user never noticed, not a single drop call. Now, we did build in some redundancy out at the sites. So if the site, for whatever reason, became an island, and it has happened, and has no longer connectivity to the overall dial plan that's being presented by one of the 3 data centers, we have BGPR in place, just like we do for, you know, distributed traffic between the 3 data centers. We call it a 4th route, call it a 3rd route, whatever you want to call it. We actually have a dedicated, you know, circuit. So we use an SD-WAN type connection back into a localized SBC. It's a much smaller SBC because it only cares about trunking that unique hospital's needs and requirements. That's trunked at about 75% of what the original numbers of trunks that we had there. Again, we've used it a couple times. It has happened. We do have to reestablish calls when that happens, but those are done in less than 3 seconds. We've tested it, both unplanned and planned. So we had a case where a fiber spur, there was a fire in the city of Illinois that cut the aerial fiber that was also a spur to Illinois Masonic. So Masonic within 3 seconds was back up and running. Yes, we lost those calls that were active, but again, they were up in 3 seconds. Dial tone out, dial tone in. So that dial plan redistributed itself to the 2Ks on site. What's great about that is that 2K was built on the layer 2 network that the VoIP PBX system is on. So we have our own little mini network there that was designed in that if we lost IP services to the phone system, our digital and analog phones still work throughout the campus, right? So we take it very seriously from an overall design perspective. So that's internal to Advocate Aurora's infrastructure. There are some external factors, and Coeo was chosen through Avtex as well as Genesis and our NICE and contact centers. We have different flavors after the merger, right? We haven't gotten down to one, but they are the chosen carrier for not only Avtex as an integrator to Genesis, but by Genesis as well as NICE and contact. And we actually trunk and peer. It's a bring your own provider in the cloud. So again, we didn't have to give up any of our dial plan. Number portability, not an issue. Simply just some programming changes, obviously, on Coeo's side to be able to peer directly into them, which has been phenomenal for us. I can't tell you how much of a help that was during COVID. Yeah, it blew our minds that we were able to do what we were able to do. And it's taken for granted, right? It's a phone. Pick it up. It should ring. It should work. Kind of like your light switch, right? It's a standard utility. So, much kudos there. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on trying to explain what we did or how we did it, but Brian, if we can go to the last slide. Well, we could certainly take deeper dives depending on the questions that come through. So outcomes and lessons learned, we significantly exceeded the original ROI projections. I talked about that. Again, we chose to buy our gear. We manage it. We have in-house engineers, heavy training, hard training. We talked about our security experts failing the firewall portions the first time they took them. And we've sustained that level of training. We exceeded our initial cost savings projections, and we continue to just drive down our telecommunications costs. I'm not going to share our SIP costs compared to PRIs or POTS lines, but I'm sure you could quickly do the math and realize how much savings there are there. Probably the biggest thing that our auditors and risk and network security appreciate about is the impermeable service delivery model, where we, knock on wood again, my on-call for engineering, network and telecom engineering in Illinois it's usually about the network and not about this voice SIP infrastructure, sadly. But it's been fantastic. Our DR plans, when we test every single year, it's an independent auditing control faction within HIT at Advocate Aurora, and we pass with flying colors. The quick and nimble internal service delivery model has been a godsend. I can't tell you the amount of tickets, the reduction in tickets that have to be generated to a carrier, and again, the waiting time that it used to take to process some of these changes has been exponentially reduced to almost nothing. We can make changes on the fly without any disruption whatsoever, and a very quick commitment time frame. One of the interesting things has been our TEM costs actually went down. So we just renewed our telecommunication expense management contract, and not only did it reduced while adding the state of Wisconsin into the mix. And that is largely because the complex billing of circuits in the old days, comparative to the way we have things set up today with our partner, and collaborator it's been a godsend. So they're not touching the amount of paperwork and the amount of billing inquiries that were once kind of pervasive, right? And they're still there because there's still plenty of work to do. We are not anywhere close to finalizing this model, in particular the state of Wisconsin. It's a little bit of the wild, wild west. Had no idea there were as many carriers there. So I'm quickly learning that, especially comparative to the Chicagoland area. And, you know, take your time as you go down this road to look at the carrier offerings, look at the equipment offerings. We looked at 3 different products. You know, obviously Sonus Ribbon was the one we chose, but we did look at other products, and we went with what we felt was best of breed. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the presentation, but you know, they've been a tremendous partner to us, and as has Coeo, right? Find the right carrier, and find the right SBC that works for you and your organization. It's been fantastic for us. Again, we're fairly self-sufficient, but you know, there's still a big job that has to be done for Coeo and Ribbon to deliver, you know, top quality products and services so that we can look real good to our customers. And then, you know, my last little note there is I wish we would have done it sooner, and we certainly can't do it fast enough in the state of Wisconsin with some of the quick hitting tariffs that are coming our way. So with that, I think we open it to Q&A. And again, I'm appreciative of being able to take the time to talk to you all and to the panelists here. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much for sharing your story. And I must say it's been a pleasure on the Coeo side to watch you go through your transformation from the old way you were doing business on the TDM side, and then moving into the SIP side with all the different type of challenges and changes, and what it's actually meant to you and your team and to the into your business. And so my question I have to you is from those changes in the migration and transformation, what is the greatest benefit to you and your team that you've experienced from making this change?
You know, I got to go to service delivery first. There's probably 4 or 5. I don't know that I could necessarily say one's more important than the other, but because we're, you know, in healthcare, and these are, you know, voice services into hospitals and surgery centers, it's got to be the uptime. Delivering that a secure, safe environment to the level that we've been able to deliver it, specifically in the state of Illinois right now, where things are mature and stable, has been a godsend. You know, I joke with Dominica Tellerica, who she's a very high-ranking senior vice president today in our organization, but at the time that I started, she was the president at Condell Medical Center. And the first 4 weeks that I was there, I saw her more than anybody else in the organization because we had wet, you know, services underground cable, and I could not keep those PRIs up. We couldn't, and they were going on, you know, bypass, which is a no-no, to Good Shepherd and other hospitals. And I thank her every time I see her. She's like, "Oh my God, here he comes again, you know, the crazy IT guy." And I said, "You know, you kicked my butt enough where I actually did something about it." Right? I said, this is not the way I want to, you know, extend my career within Advocate Aurora, to keep getting invited to president's meetings and looking at our nursing leaders, you know, with the promise that we're going to get better. And we're, you know, I'm leaving it at the mercy of a very large, you know, phone company.
Right. And then from the side, the last question I have is I think there's been a lot of regulatory change that's occurred with AT&T in the region. Has moving to SIP and changing your environment helped you mitigate any of the type of costs or issues or challenges with migrating or dealing with the incumbent ILEC?
Yeah, it's done a lot for us, right? So, you know, we talk about, in most organizations for healthcare, safety is number 1, but driving costs down is number 2, right? And on any given day, depending on what the scenario is, they're going to outrank one another. Safety is always paramount, don't get me wrong, but looking at it from a financial perspective, we've got to cut costs. The demand is there. And the message we're getting, not just from AT&T, but others, is POTS lines are going to go up. We're going to tariff you. A lot of our other services, the older legacy services that I can't quite prune off of just yet because we don't have the equipment, we're now forcibly buying the SBCs, converting those trunks to SIP, and saying, if you're going to threaten us, we're going to take it into our own hands. We now know how to do it and do it very well. And we're buying those boxes, as you all know, and we're licensing them up. We do the ports, it becomes a SIP trunk, and we do the media conversion in itself. So again, it's one of those reactionary things that I hate to be reactionary, but we probably would have written some of those circuits out a little bit longer because we don't have the time or the money to do some of this work. But you start hurting the wallets of large healthcare organizations. We have no choice but to respond, and I'll take the SIP concurrent call path price over a loaded TOTS line price any day.
Great, thank you. And I think with that, what we want to do is open it up to Q&A. Brian, Gregory, if you want to go ahead and take any type of questions from the audience.
Yeah, actually,
Go ahead, Greg.
yeah, I was gonna say, Eric, while Joe's been talking, I was looking through a few of the questions, and a couple of good ones here that I kind of caught. One was, and you sort of just touched on it, Joe, but I think the second part is probably worth it. Someone said, what caused you to start this effort? And maybe you hit that. And then they asked, did you have a kind of, what was your process behind it?
Sure. So there are a number of factors that went into it. I'm not here to berate companies or what have you, but the time it took to repair, a lot of the issues that we were having in our medical centers in the Chicagoland area was just ungodly bad. And I didn't have we didn't have a ton of solutions, but we had a robust VoIP system. So we started investigating, what is SIP stable? Can we do this? It seemed kind of a silly question now comparative to back then, because it's the same IP discussion. Oh my God, can you go 100% IP? We don't, but that's by design. We're pretty close. We're probably 80-20 if anybody wants to know, 80% IP and then some 20% digital analog, depending on where you are within the hospital. Again, that's a localized DR type plan. So it was a combination of really bad delivery service. The pricing wasn't quite an issue back, when we started this. It is now. And then just general curiosity. And a lot of people did look at us like we were a little cuckoo. It's the phone system. I mean, it's the phone network. It's been around for forever. Why would you want to change it? In fact, our CIO and CTO they pretty much told me, it better be as good as what you have now, if not better, or we're going to be in trouble. And the process itself, we did an RFI, so we got some information from a handful of the carriers. We met with them, many presentations with each one. There were 4. I don't know that it matters which ones, but you can at least guess one of them. AT&T was another one. They changed names since then, the other ones. But really and we did the same thing from a hardware perspective, right? We talked to a lot of engineering individuals out at companies like, Sonus Ribbon that produced really, really good enterprise grade hardware. That's what we wanted, right? We wanted enterprise grade. So we kind of knew what we went after. And it was probably 9 months of discovery, 6 months of architecture and plan building, and then accumulating what the initial investment was. And then maybe another 6 months of waiting for approval from the board to get the funding. So probably 2 years from the start of the plan, and just conceptual, because a lot of people thought I was crazy. But the engineers dug into it. They were fantastic, to be able to, kind of have the curiosity to start digging deep with the likes of Kevin Orofino and the other technical bodies within companies like Coeo.
Hey, here's another, I thought just a quick question, but might be illustrative, which is someone asked, does this include the local medical arts buildings, or is it just the kind of the hospital properties?
Yeah, so it depends. So in the state of Illinois, we're very mature. So all our tier 1 sites, so I would call those like our medical centers, our hospitals, all of our outpatient centers, if the if the building or the practice was also on that same campus, we just converted it. It made no sense. And now it's trickled out to all of our Advocate Medical Group facilities. So Illinois is very, very mature. So it's pretty much extended into, I call them tier 1, tier 2, and then even our Downers Grove corporate office runs on this technology. It's vacant, even though it's a hoteling type location. I don't know if everyone's seeing the same thing, but we built this wonderful, hey, come back to work when you want, and huddle rooms, and most people would rather just stay home unless there was a larger meeting, right? So we've trickled that down there. In Wisconsin, right now we're hitting the medical centers. Any new buildings, we're hitting the medical centers, hospitals, and then surgery, outpatient. The really critical campuses are the ones that are going to get the attention first. And then eventually we'll get back into the clinics, and then MOBs, office buildings, et cetera, et cetera.
And the same person asked another question, which is, just how large, and I assume they're talking about how many seats or how many users does the whole network support? I assume that's what they meant.
Well, I don't know our license counts, but I will tell you that I have over 75,000 endpoints, which are active extensions within the state of Illinois. And we actually have just a little bit above that in the state of Wisconsin. That number is likely, I think we have 24,000 active ports on IP that is converting to SIP either in 22 or early 23. So in total, I'd say somewhere between 75 and 100,000 users, active users, extensions within our voice infrastructure. So I don't know if that's large, or you guys would have to tell me.
I think that's big, but maybe somebody else will think otherwise. But it seems pretty good size to me. And then I'm conscious we're just about out of time, but I thought this was a good question. Somebody said, when the pandemic hit, what did you start using for the collab tools? And then you kind of just mentioned it, so I'll extend that. I'm guessing what they meant was, what are people using in these work from home or hybrid work environments? I'm speculating that was kind of the source of the question.
Yeah, so the first thing we did was we rerouted God knows how many trunks from our internal infrastructure to the cloud. So whether it was, contact center solution A or contact center solution B, because we were already peered directly, again, bring your own carrier kind of an environment, we just swung those DIDs and the necessary trunks. So they leveraged soft phone technology provided by those contact center solutions. So we were able to move them immediately off-prem. For everybody else, for the short run, we ran IP DSC-based, standard soft phones out of our VoIP solution. We have since changed that because we're migrating to a VPN-less environment through Zscaler, and because Zscaler won't support IP-based soft phones. Jabber in one unique instance, but you got to route through the internet, not through the cubes. But we'll get into that later if anybody's curious. So we actually we do a direct Teams Power App plugin provided by our VoIP infrastructure. The other option for us would have been bring your own carrier, which Coeo could have done had we gone to Microsoft with that request. Instead, one of the few times that our friends at Microsoft didn't necessarily force me into buying a better, more expensive license, we worked within their app development team and have our own Power App there that basically is just a plug-in soft phone client for users to use when they're off-prem. And it's an external call that they want to either take or receive. We control, it's Coeo trunking, so it's still our dial tone, it's still our DID, terminates to our voicemail enterprise system. So regardless of whether it's a medical call and there's pertinent PII or PHI left on a voicemail, we have complete control of it, right? We're not using cell phones, we're not using, exterior communication devices. We wanted to make it a part of the integral dial plan. So those are some of the creative things that we've been able to come up with forcibly through the pandemic.
And I'm just curious now, this is the Greg question they added on, which is, how do you think users have, do they like that solution? Do you think it's been well adopted or well received?
Honestly, I don't know for certain. I will tell you that usage reports continue to go up as we onboard more and more people. And that's always the number one way to, for me, to see how adoption has been, kind of accepted and embraced. We've got 2,000 of our 7,500 non-clinical at-home workers already converted to it. So some will move from Jabber and other, devices, et cetera. So there'll be some number portability type concerns because we'll have to port from outgoing vendor to Coeo where our main trunking is. But that's just going to take a little bit more time. But it's, put it this way, in the 9 months that we were baking this idea, Greg, every time our CIO had a webinar for all of our HIT team members, that question was asked every time. When can I make external phone calls from Teams and or from some other kind of solution other than my cell phone?
Right.
So, I don't like being on the naughty list. So we had to come up with something creative.
I think that's corporate America for you. Nobody wants to be part of those questions. Hey, Brian, I know we're just about out of time, and I wasn't watching the last group of questions. Has anything come in the last minute or two that we should catch?
No, I think we gathered it all up, Greg. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Okay, I think with that being said, I want to thank everyone for your participation and thank you very much to Joe Tenuta and our partners at Ribbon Communications. I think we expect to send out a real quick email to everybody, and please give us your opinions, your thoughts, your concerns, and if you want to have additional conversations, we'd love to have them with you. And with that being said, guys, everyone have a great day. Enjoy this incredible day in Chicago that's unusually warm. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Well, stay well, everyone.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Joe.